Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Compass Point. Those of you who know me well know that I'm a lover of words. I love the sound of words. I love studying foreign language. I love, in particular, etymology, which looks at the roots of words, where the words came from, sometimes breaking words apart and trying to understand the original meaning behind them really helps to embellish what the words mean. And so this week in my Sunday message, I'm going to be reflecting with you on providence. Providence is a great word. And when you break it down to its original components, it's basically composed of two main words in Latin, pro or pre, which means before, and video, which is the Latin verb to see. So providence literally means to see before. And when you think about that in terms of our relationship with God, it simply means that God has already seen everything that happens before we do. He sees before. I'm going to be reflecting with you on how comforting and how important it is for us to know that God sees everything. Another word that I'll mention on Sunday is a word that's probably not very familiar or commonly used by us today, prevenient. Prevenient, it simply means that God goes before us. All the places that we inhabit or hope to go toward are places that God already knows and in fact occupies. So it makes me think of this verse recorded in Psalm 139, verse 16, where David says this, "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." It's interesting that he says that the days of his life, of every human life, have been ordained by God. Now, that doesn't mean that we're like robots and that we just automatically follow the lives that God has pre-programmed for us. We know that God allows people to enjoy an incredible amount of freedom, and a great deal of the situations that we find ourselves in are directly related to choices that we make, either good or bad. So it's not like God ordains them in a very strict and narrow sense. It simply means that God knew about them. They are familiar to Him before they become familiar to us. They were written in His book. They are in His mind long before we live them. And so it makes me think of an interview that I read some years ago in the New York Times with the prolific writer Robert Carro. Perhaps you're familiar with him or some of his books. He's best known for his multi-volume biography of the American president Lyndon Johnson. It began back in 1982. It's taking him nearly 4 decades to complete this 5-volume biography. 4 volumes have already been published, and the 5th and final volume is set to be published in a couple of years. The interviewer asked him a very interesting question back in a few years ago, 2018. And, he was trying to understand how Robert Carro goes about writing these incredibly long biographies. How do you begin? What's your guiding principle as you are writing all of these thousands of pages? And Robert Carro gave an interesting response to that question. How do you keep track of the storyline was the main question. And he said this, "Before I start a book, I must know the last line. If I can't do the book. Once I have it, I always write toward that last line." I find that very interesting. And when you think about it, the very same thing could be said about the Bible, that the last line has already been written. Genesis 1 begins with, "In the beginning," deep in cosmic history. The final word of Revelation 22 is the word amen that has already been written. So these are the bookends of cosmic history, the beginning and the end. God has already written the amen, and all of history is working toward that last word, that final line. It's already all known to God. He's guiding it, He's directing it, and in the incredible storyline of cosmic history is the story of your life and mine. All the days ordained for us have already been written. God sees it before we do. It's an incredibly comforting thing to know. And I'll say a little bit more about that on Sunday morning, about how important it is for us to know that and how it gives our lives structure and purpose and the blessing of God. So I hope you watch the message that will premiere this Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, and I hope that that message will give us more opportunity to reflect on what I'm just introducing this morning, how God sees before we see. God knows before we know. Be well and be blessed.